Oh. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you, Hannah.
Okay, it's a bit disconcerting because all I can see is the presentation. I can't see anybody. We'll make a start. If anybody has got any questions, you know, I'm happy to be interrupted, whether you want to just put your hand up and Vanessa can interject, or just turn your sound on and shout out. Otherwise, I will stop periodically and we can go through any questions or comments that anybody may have. So tonight is the final of our update meetings. I think we're on number 6 now. So it's a similar format to what we've run in previous years. We'll have a quick look at countryside stewardship, catchment sensitive farming, and the new schemes that are coming on board. And then I will hand over to Kat, and she will tell you all about what's available in terms of woodland grants, and Lydia will finish on the FIPL programme. I'm not going to dwell long on the BPS. As you're all aware, we're seeing a greater reduction again this year, and after 2023, entitlements will cease. So it's important to note going forward, because the entitlement, with the way that they're working out the BPS, in order to be eligible in future years, you need to claim in 2023, which I'm sure everybody is aware of. So I'm going to move on from BPS because I think everybody is probably up to speed with where we are with that. So in terms of countryside stewardship, you're probably aware that we have seen an increase in payment rates, both in terms of revenue and capital grant rates. So these new rates will apply to current and future countryside stewardship schemes, both higher tier and mid tier, and the capital grants. And on average, we're seeing a 30% up in terms of your rates, and these will be adjusted automatically. And it's important to know that if you are in a HLS scheme, you will receive the rates, your previous rates, so you will not see an uprise in your rates. So in terms of your capital grants, the increase in payments will apply to agreements from the 1st of January of this year. So if your agreement started last year, so if you started some walling work last year, you will continue to be paid using the previous rate. So what they've said is, if you have capital work to do that has not yet started under an agreement that started before the 1st of January, you can choose to withdraw that part of the work from your existing agreement, cancel it, and then reapply, so that you can benefit from the new increased rates. The only caveat is, if you wish to reapply for these options, you will potentially, depending on what you've applied for, you may be required to source new endorsements or consents. So if it was something under catchment sensitive farming, you know, you would be able to provide the approval that we have given you for the previous agreement. The other caveat is, if you reapply, there is a possibility that if there was a lot of applications and it came down to scoring, you may not be offered agreement. That it seems unlikely, but just to make you aware that is there is a slim possibility. So if we have a quick look at existing agreements, whether that be a HLS, a higher tier, or a mid tier, what we are seeing now is that in terms of your HLS, Natural England are still offering mirror agreements or a transfer across to higher tier. In addition to that, if you are in a HLS agreement, you can apply for the Countryside Stewardship Agreement to run alongside your current agreement if you're wishing to do things such as creating or restoring habitats. So they're not going to pay you to do the same thing again. There's not going to be any dual funding, but if you're wanting to do something above and beyond what you're currently being paid for, that is now possible. In addition, the SFI moorland standard can sit alongside either an existing HLS or a Countryside Stewardship Agreement. We'll have a look in more detail on the SFI moorland standard in a later slide, but basically you are being paid to do survey work and sort of find out, assess what is there on the ground. So you're not being paid to deliver. If you're in an existing agreement, you can now add a capital grant on top of your existing agreement. Caveat is where compatible. So, you know, that might be some boundary works, for example, some walling, some fencing. And capital grants can now be applied to SSI parcels as long as they're under a management option. The point about the UP2, that is the breeding wader option under Countryside Stewardship. And this is just to make you aware that at the end of your agreement, so in the 5th year, you will be required to do a bird count survey, and this will need to be conducted by a third party. So this is something that we could do if you wished us to do it, or we can suggest somebody else. And the final point is that you do still need to put in a claim for your revenue options, and that's the claim period opens on the 14th of March and runs to the 15th of May, same as your BPS. The closing date is same as your BPS. So what's on offer this year in terms of Countryside Stewardship? Higher tier applications are open now. So whilst higher tier tends to be Natural England invitation only, if you are keen to do something big, bold and ambitious, you know, it's worth putting in an expression of intent. So that expression of intent, you submit it between the 7th of Feb earlier this month to the 28th of April. They will then score all those expressions of intent, and there will be a threshold, and the ones that are above the threshold will be taken forward. So you'll be contacted by Natural England, and then you will be able to draw up an agreement with consultation with a Natural England officer. The other option is a mid-tier. So mid-tier schemes are generally, they're 5-year schemes with revenue and capital items. So if you apply this year, the application date opens later next month on the 21st of March and will remain open till the 18th of August. If you apply this year, you would get an agreement that started on the 1st of January 2024. So whilst we know what the payments are in terms of the revenue and the capital rates, they are still potentially tweaking some of the prescriptions. So there is suggestions that some of the options will be changed slightly. In terms of your capital grants, so this is now, the capital grant scheme now includes four themes. So that's boundary trees and orchards, which encompasses things like walling and hedgerows. Water quality, this is where catchment sensitive farming comes in, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail further on. So this is things like potentially concreting yards, roofing over middens, fencing off watercourses. Then the third theme is air quality. So this is looking at ammonia reductions. There's a few options available there, such as automatic scraper systems for slurry systems. And then the final theme is natural flood management. So in there, we've now seen more options available, leaky woody dams being one of them. So the other important thing to note in terms of your capital grants is it's now a 3-year scheme. So previously it's been a 2-year scheme, but it's now a 3-year scheme. And similarly for your mid-tier, whilst previously you only had 2 years to complete your capital works, you now have 3 years in a 5-year scheme. So the final point on there is for any grant, the land will need to be registered. So that's if you're wanting to do work on a yard or a building, you will need an RLR number. So it is a good time to check. So if you log on to your BPS and have a look to see whether you need to register that land. So in terms of countryside stewardship, your 5-year mid-tier, as I said previously, we are expecting to see a review of some of the options. We know the payment rates have gone up, but we are expecting some tweaking to the prescriptions. And there is a suggestion that the UP2, the breeding wader option, which is quite popular in the park for obvious reasons, that they are going to tweak that. If you have SSSIs or scheduled ancient monuments on your holding, you will need to include those with your application, and you will need approval to be able to go forward with that. If you are wanting to use GS6, which is the species-rich grassland, so if you've got some nice flowery hay meadows and you're wanting to use that option, you will need to notify the RPA by the 27th of May. This is in order for them to then contract out to someone like ADAS to come and actually survey the land to check that it is eligible. So as I said previously, your capital items need to be completed now in the first 3 years. You've got a limit on spend, so you've got 120,000 for air and water quality items and 50,000 for your boundaries, trees and orchards items. If you are interested in doing some work that requires catchment sensitive farming approval, so things like concreting and roofing, then you really need to let us know as soon as possible and ideally give us 10 weeks notice prior to submission. We are expecting a lot more entries to mid-tier, so it may be that we will see the scoring kick in. So if we do, then it will be competitive, and it would be sensible for you to put in a balanced application. So, you know, not £100,000 worth of concrete and a field corner. You know, make sure you've got a balanced application in terms of your capital and your revenue options. And finally, as with previously, commons and woodlands are not eligible for mid-tier. They will have to go into a higher tier agreement. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but here are some examples of what's available under a mid-tier. So we've seen massive increase in the payment rate for the GS5, the low input grassland in SDA. So about 3 years ago, that was only £16 a hectare, and now it's gone up to £98 a hectare. So these are on the screen now. These are some of the popular choices. These are really what the most common options that we're seeing used in the park. Some of them can be applied part parcel. So your UP2, your breeding wader option, can be applied part parcel. There are restrictions on these options in terms of supplementary feeding. So some of them, like the UP2, you could choose to feed in a field corner, and you can just remove that from your agreement. Other options like your GS1, taking field corners and small areas out of management, pay very well, but there is a maximum amount that you can apply for per area. So before we go any further, Vanessa, is there any questions or any comments?
None so far, thanks, Hannah.
If anybody wants to shout out, please do. I'll carry on. So your capital grants is a standalone 3-year agreement. Like I said before, you know, we're looking now at 4 different themes. So we've seen an increase in payment in terms of your walling has now gone up to £31.91 a metre. So up from the £25, and then your hedge gapping is increased as well. But that's just an example. You know, there's an increase in the majority of the options available. Your water and air quality could include things like roofing, concreting and tracks. And your natural flood management is now more, there's more available under there, like your leaky woody dams. So if you were to go for a standalone capital grant, you do have a maximum spend of £20,000 for each individual theme. So it is currently open for applications. And there are rolling start dates. So if you've got an application in now, you know, they might process it within 8 weeks. So you could start the work by early summer if all goes to plan. It's worth bearing in mind, though, that you can only submit one application per SBI in any calendar year. So say you were to apply now and you got all your works, you got your agreement in June, you did all your works, claimed, you wouldn't be able to apply again in October. You'd have to wait till next year. The capital grant can also be used by those in existing HLS schemes, but it will not dual fund. So if you have got an existing HLS and you've used and you with ELS and UELS and you've used walls to score points, those walls will not be eligible for funding. And the final point, as I said previously, if you are wanting to use options that require CSFO approval, you must contact us with plenty of notice, ideally 10 weeks. So just to make you aware, in terms of your capital grant claims, you must ensure that all the work has been completed and paid for in full before a claim can be made. So we're still being paid in arrears. And work has to be completed within 3 years of the start date. So up until this year, you had 2 years of agreement, but now we've now upped it to 3 years. And if you've got an existing agreement, so an existing 2-year agreement, you can request an extension. Your minimum claim is £500, unless it's the final claim or it's so other than that, it is £500 is your minimum claim. And the RPA must receive all claims and supporting documents and evidence no later than 3 months after the agreement end date, and this is stated on your agreement. So in terms of evidence, it tends to be now it's only just photos. But if you are using a contractor, you will need to keep receipts and, you know, potentially have those available if you're inspected. So receipts and bank statements, etc. And then finally, is just a repeat of what we've said, you know, only one application per SBI per year. Before we move on to catchment sensitive farming, is there any questions? Vanessa?
There aren't any in the chat. Just to make sure everyone is currently muted. So if anyone is wanting to ask a question and wondering why we aren't hearing them, that might be why. If they haven't noticed, they're on mute. But so far, no questions.
Well, I'll carry on. So catchment sensitive farming is it's a DEFRA scheme. It's a national scheme, but it's been delivered in the national park by the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority. So myself, Bryony Freeman, Fiona Robinson and Jane Lecoq, the catchment sensitive farming officers, and we work across the park. So we're now covering the Swale, the Ewer, the Eden, the Wharf, the Upper Air, the Upper Loon and the Upper Ribble. Previously, the sole focus really of CSF was to reduce diffuse water pollution, but now our remit has been extended. So we're also looking at reducing ammonia emissions, and natural flood management. So we're doing that through the use of grants, and we'll have a look at that, and also advice. So we can commission on your behalf reports, and these are pulled together by companies such as ADAS, SAC. So that's let, it's a contract that's let by the RPA. So from 2023, CSF has increased in terms of where we can offer support, and it's now available across England, but it is targeted. So as I've said, we can offer free one-to-one advice and bespoke reports. So these are delivered on our behalf. It's contracted out, people like SAC, ADAS, and there's things like your nutrient management and soils. So we can arrange for somebody to come out and test soils on 5 fields across the holding and analyse your muck and then produce a report. Farm infrastructure audits, slurry and water management plans, including natural flood management. We also host training events, you know, on farm, and we can offer free help and advice on applying for countryside stewardship and CSF items. So payment rates have gone up as well. These are some of the more popular options. There's a whole host of other options available, but these tend to be ones that most people are more interested in. Right, before I move on, is there any questions on countryside stewardship or catchment sensitive farming?
I don't have any in the chat. No.
It's really disconcerting because all I can see on my screen is the presentation, and it's
I can see.
I can't see anybody. Feels like I'm talking to myself. Anyway, before I move on, if anybody is interested in countryside stewardship or catchment sensitive farming, please get in touch with one of us. We can or Vanessa, and she'll get in touch with one of us. But we're happy to come out and offer advice and you know, make suggestions. You know, look at opportunities in terms of countryside stewardship on the farm. So yeah, if you want advice in terms of going in terms of an application, you know, we're more than happy to do that. We're more than happy to come out on farm. So move on now to the environmental land management programme. So as you're aware, there's 3 elements to ELM. We've got sustainable farm incentive. So the idea is that this is going to be a basic environmental. Sorry, was someone saying something then? Or
I didn't hear.
No, I think it was maybe it was just I could hear some sort of glitching. I wondered whether anybody was speaking. So we've got SFI, and this is basically basic environmental works. And the idea is that most farmers should be able to apply for at least one or several standards that sit amongst SFI. And then we are continuing with countryside stewardship. So this was going to be the local nature recovery element. And this is now being sort of countryside stewardship is now is now going to continue rather than LNR. And the idea is that this will be a more targeted local approach. So I think in the national park, we're assuming this will be looking at things like breeding waders, upland hay meadows. So things that make us distinct and things that enhance the natural environment. In addition, it's sort of a continuation from the facilitation fund. So the farmer groups that have been running in the Dales, and some of them are still running. We're looking at CS Plus. So this is really looking at ways of farmers working together and hopefully, well, being paid to work together. So there's a suggestion that payment by results may come into this. And then the final strand of ELM is landscape recovery. So this is a scheme that looks at bringing large areas of land together, so across holdings, and focusing on things like peatland restoration or large-scale woodland planting. So going forward, we're hoping that most farmers in the Dales will be and should be able to enter both SFI and CS, you know, sort of, so they can sit together, dovetail or sit on top of each other. And we are expecting to see full rollout by 2025, although there is a caveat that things don't seem to be happening as fast as we may wish, but that is the ambition anyway at the moment. So how will SFI and CS interact? So at the moment, these are two distinct schemes, and it's not very easy to sit them on the same parcel of land. But the idea is over the next 2 years, as the schemes evolve, it will become easier. So you will be able to dovetail them, and it will be like an integrated online service in terms of your application. So at the moment, SFI applications are through your BPS portal, and I think the idea is that going forward, everything will be delivered in a similar way, and it will allow you at application stage to be able to have a better understanding and be better in control of how you pull your applications together. Currently, SFI and CS options are under review, and we have seen, like last year, we saw some SFI standards being available, and in terms of CS countryside stewardship, we're seeing the same options available, but we are seeing some tweaking, and we'll get the full details of that later this month. So the beauty of both of them is that you have the ability to select a combination of the different options and put them together. So you don't have to apply it across your whole farm. You can just single out field parcels that would suit the SFI standard, the CS option that you are wanting to apply for. What we have seen this year is that SFI is delivering standards that are very similar to CS options, and we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail in a further slide. But what they have said is that where similar actions are being delivered in SFI and CS, that there will be a parity of payment rates, so that you won't be a disadvantage if you go for one scheme or the other. What they're hoping for is a much more flexible approach, you know, especially when over the evolution of the two schemes, and this will increase people's opportunity and ambition level as well. If there's more flexibility, I think the hope is that, you know, more people will apply and they'll get more land under agreements. And what they have said is, or they've listened in terms of cash flow, and they're now offering quarterly payments, and this is what they have been doing with SFI. So this is a continuation and an extension of that offer. So what is Sustainable Farm Incentive SFI? So it is a 3-year scheme with the opportunity to amend your agreement on every 12-month anniversary. So you can increase the amount of land that you have in agreement. You can amend what actions you want to fulfill. So the SFI is made up of standards. So a standard is an option. So at the moment, we're looking at standards in terms of grasslands and soils, and there's quite a lot available for arable, and there's things like woodlands, moorland and rough grazing, and hedgerows. And in the future, we will see standards looking at walling. So each standard has different actions. So these used to be called ambitions, but we're now calling them actions. And these can be grouped or stacked. So potentially you could have, in the same field parcel, you could have a grassland standard and then a hedgerow standard. And the idea is, as long as they're not dual funding, that will be okay. And the more actions that you are able to fulfill, the higher the payment rate. So this is again a rolling application window and quarterly payments. And in addition, they have, to try and increase uptake to incentivise, they are also offering an annual management payment of an additional £20 per hectare up to 50 hectares. So the maximum is £1,000. And this is really to incentivise you to apply, but it's basically to try and pay you for your admin, your management time for that agreement. That's how they're defining that payment. So in terms of who can apply, who is eligible, it is in terms of tenanted land, is only the tenants can apply and be paid for SFI, because it's about delivery and it's about delivering actions. And as the tenant is the one that's actively farming the land, then they are the only ones that can apply. So a landlord cannot apply. However, you should only apply if you are confident you're going to have management control of the land for the 3-year period. So there is an understanding that by signing up, you can undertake those management activities. However, if you unexpectedly lose management control of the land, you will not be penalised, but you must tell the RPA as soon as practicable, and then it will be removed from your agreement. So these are the standards that are available for 23. So we've got the 3 existing standards that were rolled out last year. The arable and horticultural soil standard, the improved grassland soils, and the moorland and rough grazing standard. And then the new standards that will be available when the application window opens, which isn't yet, but it will be sometime later in the summer. And there's the low and no input grassland. And we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail in a later slide. The improved grassland, the nutrient management plan, integrated pest management, hedgerows, and the arable and horticulture. So there's another 6 standards that will be available this year, that will be rolled out this year. And in addition to that, there is also now open for application, the annual health and welfare review. So this is about funding for the vets to come out and look at different, well, depending on which sector you're in, they can look at things. So for the sheep payment, they'll be looking at wormer efficiency. For the beef, I think it's BVD. So basically the vet comes out, does some testing, writes a report, and you get paid for that visit and for that report. You can only submit 1 health and welfare review a year. So if you're sheep and beef, you have to choose whether you're using sheep, or likewise if you're sheep and dairy, you can only do one a year. So this is an idea of some of the future standards. So next year we are likely to see a dry stone wall maintenance standard, and going forward there's some others that may well be useful in terms of Dale's farms.
We have a question, Hannah, if you don't mind me interrupting.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Someone's asked, what is the definition of a standard?
A standard is an option. So it basically is just it's there for whatever reason, rather than calling it an option, they're calling it a standard. So on the screen now we've got the low input grassland standard, but basically it's a mirror to the low input grassland option that's available under countryside stewardship. So they're using standard as another word for option. Does that answer the question? Sorry, I can't see anybody.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Hannah.
That's fine. So on the screen here is a bit more detail about the SFI low input grassland standard with the 2 payment rates for SDA ground and non-SDA ground. So basically this is delivering very similar to the countryside stewardship low input grassland option. In fact, it's pretty much the same. The only difference is that within SFI, you are allowed to supplementary feed as long as you are not causing poaching. So under countryside stewardship, the same option, or that you would not be able to supplementary feed. So other than that, it is very similar. You aren't given dates either within the SFI. So rather than saying you must shut the meadow up for, on such and such a date, here we're just being told to close for 7 weeks during spring and summer. So otherwise they are very, very similar. Like I say, this standard to the countryside stewardship low input grassland option, and the payment rates are the same, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So in terms of the moorland and rough grazing standard, at present there is only an introductory level or offer on the table. So the payment rate is fixed. So there's not there's not an increase in payment with an increase in action delivery. What they're actually asking you to do is to go out and to assess, to survey the land to see what's there. So that's things like peat depth, vegetation, historic environment. And basically it's so that you have got an understanding of what public goods you have available, and also identify any opportunities to maintain or enhance these public goods. So it's not about paying you to deliver. So that is why the moorland and rough grazing standard can be applied, can be used alongside an existing countryside stewardship agreement or HLS agreement. So there are additional payments as well if it's common land. From 2024, we are expecting to see a new suite of actions that will sit under the moorland and rough grazing standard. So these will be about delivery, but you will not be able to sort of advance forward until you have done the introductory level. So this needs to be done first. And basically, it's like I said, it's about surveying. So every 10 hectares, you need to have done an assessment. You need to have completed an assessment.
Before we move on, Hannah, I've got another question in the chat. I think it refers to the grassland standard.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. And they've asked for inputs. Does it include application of nitrogen?
Yes, it does. Yes, it will do. I would imagine it'll be very similar. I mean, on here it doesn't actually say what your fertilizer inputs can be. In terms of countryside stewardship, the amount of nitrogen you can put on is very, very low, and I think it would mirror that. But certainly it will not allow you to increase the existing whatever you're doing currently in terms of whether that's bagged fertilizer, farmyard manure or slurry. You can't increase it going forward if you go into agreement. But yes, that does include nitrogen out of a bag. I'm not going to spend long on landscape recovery. This basically is about delivering really big, large scale projects. So in the pack, we have got one project that is being built up, that's being developed, and that is the Three Dales project that centres around Ingleborough, and that is being developed by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. So that went forward last year. The idea is that the second round of applications will focus on net zero, protected sites and habitat creation. So they are looking for applications, and it is open to any individuals or groups who want to come together to deliver some ambitious projects. Last year, 22 projects were put forward, and up to 25 will go forward this year. So because these are quite ambitious projects, the first few years are spent pulling it all together to developing the project. So this is with the applicant and Natural England looking at what can be achieved across that site. So I think the Ingleborough project is looking at things like peatland restoration. I think it also includes some works on this calcareous grassland, limestone pavement, breeding waders, those sort of things. So working with several landowners, sort of pulling together the application, and potentially these agreements can last a lot longer, up to 20 years. So it's not an off the shelf, off the peg option list. You know, it can be really tailored, and similarly your payment rates will need to be calculated, etc., etc. You know, these are bespoke agreements. So to finish, in terms of what's available in the new schemes, you've got SFI, Countryside Stewardship Plus, when we're all, you know, with farmers working together, and Landscape Recovery. And the idea is that you will be able to enter a combination of these schemes, as long as you're not being paid twice to deliver the same action. So going forward, we are hoping that the service in terms of the application process will be much more streamlined, and it will be much easier for you to be able to see and consider what is available, what you are eligible for. In the meanwhile, farmers and land managers are being encouraged to enter Countryside Stewardship and now SFI, you know, the standards that are available. From 2025, it will only be possible to enter into new agreements through the new environmental land management schemes. So, you know, we know that we're going to have to sort of look and consider so many different options and standards. So, you know, I suppose it's a bit of a learning curve for all of us going forward.
Got another question come in, Hannah. Someone's asked, two, but I'll ask the first one first. Someone's asked, if you're already in the SFI and you want to add options, for example, the moorland and rough grazing standard, can you only add them after each year?
My understanding is you can only add them at your 12-month point, yes. That's my understanding.
Thanks. And the second question is, do you have to have claimed BPS and have previous entitlements in order to then claim any of the newer schemes?
SFI, currently you have to claim BPS. The other newer schemes, and I think that it will change going forward, I'm sure it is. I can't remember the dates for that. The other schemes, I think will be available to others that haven't claimed BPS. Sorry, I'm being a bit vague on that, but I'll happily look into it.
Thanks, Hannah. There's another one just come in asking, if you enter into Countryside Stewardship this year and want to have a new standard on an already entered parcel, can you change to the new standards, referring to the standards that haven't currently been released? I think the ones that are coming in summarise what they mean.
So is that in SFI? If you're in Countryside Stewardship, you you can't easily amend your agreement. SFI, you will be able to amend it on the 12-monthly intervals. However, what they've said is, rather than disadvantage people, if you are in CS or HLS and you want to transfer across to one of the new schemes, as long as you are delivering the same environmental benefit in the new schemes, that will be a possibility. And that will be able, you'll be able to do that without penalty. Does that answer that question?
I think so. Yes, thank you. They put thank you. So yeah, I haven't had anything else come in yet, so I think we can move
Okay.
on.
Before we move on, I will just say, if anybody wants us to come out and look at SFI in detail on your farm, what you can apply for, or even do a comparison between SFI and CS, we can do that. So please do get in touch. We're happy to come out and offer advice and look at the two schemes together, or whether you can dovetail CS and SFI together. So please do get in touch if you want us to. I'm not going to go into detail on the other DEFRA grants. You've probably seen what is available. We have seen the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund has opened for the productivity and slurry application, so that is available now, and there's a whole host of things available. And the Animal Health and Welfare will open shortly, so there's everything from cattle crushes to plastic slats and snackers for creep feeding. So there's a much larger list of items available. They have said that they will be scoring applications. I haven't looked at detail, and I can see that the scoring is it's available for everybody to see. So when you put your applications together, you'll be able to see how it scores. But it does look more attractive and appealing, and the minimum grant is now £1,000 to make it easier for those that want to just apply for a few items. So in terms of what else is available, the Future Farming Resilience Fund is still open and available, and that is being delivered around the country by different agencies, different organisations. And this really is offering you group and one-to-one advice and support in terms of going forward without BPS. So basically, it's looking at ways to we're not going to fill that gap, but ways to make it make the farm sustainable going forward. So locally, the Farmer Network are delivering this work on behalf of the Prince's Countryside Resilience Programme, but there's other organisations delivering. If you're particularly interested in things like, doing a farm carbon audit, there's very tailored offers as well available. So other things that are available, we've seen a slurry infrastructure grant, an application round of that has been and gone, closed in January. That will open again next year, so it's not just a one-off, but we are expecting to see other things under the Farming Transformation Fund later on this year as well. So these are looking at things that might include some robotics, so in terms of increasing efficiency and productivity. So you'll be grateful to know that's the end of my presentation, and I'm hoping that, yes, I've stopped sharing. So if anybody's got any more questions, please shout. Otherwise, if you're wanting any help and advice on countryside stewardship or SFI or thinking about what to do, please get in touch. Either myself or one of us will come out. We'll happily come out. So if nobody's got any more questions, we shall move on. Oh.
No questions, but some thank yous.
That's all right. Right then, Kat, if you would like to take over.
Oh, hang on, sorry.
Oh.
Sorry. Just come in. We've got a question. If you're in a mid-tier with a capital grant ongoing, can you still apply for a standalone capital grant?
Yeah, Linda, you will be able to. I'm assuming that you're talking about in a different field parcel. So you will be able to on a different field parcel. Good. Right, I will let Kat take over.
Thanks, Hannah. I don't know if we want to just give people a couple of minutes if people want to have a comfort break. Might be good just to have a little bit of a break, go and get a drink or something. Just give it a couple of minutes and then I'll start if that works for everybody. Obviously we'll stay on here, but just give people the opportunity to just have a minute before I start the presentation.
Okay.
Okie doke. So I'll kick off now. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to create some space in their head for even more information. So what I'll be covering today is the main funding opportunities that are available for woodland creation in the Yorkshire Dales at the moment. Some of them are available across the whole park and some of them are only available in specific areas. What I will say is most of the information that I'm going to be giving tonight is just a brief overview. And if you have an idea of where you would like to plant some trees, or you're considering woodland creation and would quite like to have some advice, please do get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. And then we'll come out to your site and we'll assess it and give you a breakdown of all the options that are available to you. And then you can make the decision about which one you think you would like to move forward with. The best time to get in touch with us is as soon as you think you might want to plant some trees. As I'll come on to, it's a very long process, starting from the first initial contact that you make with us to getting trees in the ground. So it's not something that happens quickly. It's a long process. I'll come on to that later. But just a brief overview of what I'll be covering in this session is these different funding streams. The first three cover the funding of the actual woodland planting itself. And the last one, the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, is for sites that are over 5 hectares that need specific surveys in order to assess their suitability for woodland creation. This is relatively new and something that's funded through the Forestry Commission off the back of some new guidance that has been created over the past year. So if you have a site that's in an area that might have, you know, a lot of waders nearby, so curlew, lapwing, or it's on an area that could be considered to be priority habitat, before we can assess if that site is suitable, you might need to do some surveys to assess its suitability. This is only available for sites over 5 hectares, and the Forestry Commission will fund 70% of the cost of those surveys. But we can advise you on this. We can help you do the paperwork and find the necessary contractors to do that work for you. So that's just about the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, the last one on the slide there. For the others, I'll go through them in a bit more detail now, and then I'll pause after each one, and Vanessa can let me know if there's any questions in the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll pause again. So if you do have a question, please ask it, and hopefully be able to give you some advice on that. The English Woodland Creation Offer, or UCO, is probably the one that most people are most familiar with. It's funded through the Forestry Commission and is available across the whole national park. So it doesn't matter where you are, you have access to this funding. It's quite a good funding stream for if you want to plant trees in an area that meets quite a lot of different amenity values for woodland creation, and that's the additional contributions at the bottom there. And that's what attracts a lot of people to this option for woodland creation. It says there that it covers 100% of standard woodland creation costs. It's a little bit misleading. What that means is that they will fund up to a certain amount of costs for woodland creation, and then it is anticipated that you will fund the gap between what the actual cost is. But just like CS payments, this has gone up in the past few months. So previously you used to only get, I think it was about £6 a metre for fencing, whereas now under UCO, I think it's gone up to about 8. You know, your fencing might be a little bit more expensive, but you're getting a little bit more money to help fund that woodland creation proposal. The maintenance payments are £350 a hectare for 10 years. So for every hectare that you plant, you will get that maintenance payment to upkeep the woodland and keep it to the standard that the Forestry Commission requests. But the thing that, as I said before, attracts most people to it is this idea of the additional contributions. So as well as getting your maintenance payments and getting that contribution towards the creation of the woodland, if you meet any of these requirements, then you also get a one-off additional contribution. And these are stackable. However, again, a little bit misleading, because in a lot of areas, if you are hitting that boundary of nature recovery of up to £2,800 a hectare, you're probably not going to be creating an area of woodland that provides recreational access and meets the criteria for that contribution as well. But you might get flood risk, water quality and riparian buffers. So that's a significant contribution towards the creation of your woodland. And that's what attracts a lot of people to this offer. Just like with a lot of CS schemes, if you are applying for UCO, you are expected to apply for your payment in arrears. So you would pay for the upfront cost, and then you would apply for that payment after the woodland has been created. Any questions on UCO so far?
I haven't any in the chat so far. Thanks, Kat.
Cool. Hannah was right. It is very strange, this. I can't see anything except my presentation. The next funding stream that I'm going to talk about is called Grow Back Greener, and this is funded by the Woodland Trust and is only available within the Northern Forest area. Previously, this didn't include most of Cumbria, but the boundary is shifting slightly. So for some landowners within the Cumbria area of the park, it is now becoming an option for you as well. We're just waiting on the official announcement for that. This is slightly different for UCO for quite a few different reasons. The biggest thing that attracts a lot of people to it is that it covers 100% of actual costs. So if we take that example that I used before, rather than the standard blanket rate of saying £8 a metre for fencing, whatever the cost is, Grow Back Greener will cover it, as long as it comes within the cost per hectare budget that they allocate for every site. The other attraction with this funding stream is that contractors are paid directly through the National Park Authority, so no upfront payment is needed. Maintenance payments also work in a different way. So you receive £3,000 a hectare, and 70% of that is paid after the first year of planting, rather than on an annual basis. The idea for this is that you're going to spend more money on your woodland in those first 5 years, whether that's for establishment, whether that's because you need to get rid of your plastic tubes in year 5. That money is, you're going to need more of that money in the first 5 years. But then after year 5, as long as you're meeting the minimum stocking density, which I believe is 85% of the original stocking density, you will receive that remainder of 30% for you to manage your woodland into the future. And that agreement lasts for 15 years. There's also an option to do natural colonisation through this funding stream. It varies a bit differently in terms of the maintenance payments, but if you didn't want to do tree planting and you wanted to leave an area to rewild, as long as there's evidence that there's a seed source nearby, the Woodland Trust will help you to fence off that area to allow it to regenerate in its own time. Any questions so far?
No, thank you, Kat.
Okay. And the final funding stream that I'm going to talk about is the Trees for Climate Fund. It sounds very strange offering a funding stream that is sort of facilitated by Kirklees Council, but it comes from the same pot of money as all the other funding. It comes from DEFRA. I think a few people are a little bit misled about that detail, but it's a very minor detail, and it's available within the White Rose Forest, which is basically the same area as the Northern Forest, again with a little bit of a buffer. We're trying to focus a lot of our efforts in what we call the Suno catchment area to help minimise flood risk in that area. Very similar in that they will fund 100% of costs, but differently, there isn't really a cap on that, and anything that you need for your site, they are happy to assist you with and fund. The key word here is bespoke. So for whatever your site needs, let's say you wanted to plant some trees, but you might also want to put some scrapes in to improve the area for wildlife in different ways, Trees for Climate would look to fund that. It's incredibly flexible, and it's not sort of given a standard costs or maintenance payment rate, and that's what makes it a little bit different to the other funding streams. But there's far more flexibility within that in terms of what you can get funded. And I think that's everything on that. Any other questions?
Not yet, thanks, Kat.
Okay. So,
oh yes, sorry, one has
go
just
on.
come in. Oh, it's not as much a question, but just to say, the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust also provides capital grants for woodland creation and can provide funding to meet any shortfalls if schemes are funded through other providers, and also grants for landscape trees and hedgerows. And then there's a link to the appropriate page on the YDMT website.
Brilliant. Thank you for
also
that.
to help remove plastic tree guards.
Yeah, definitely, and that's something that we're really hoping to do more of, is to use less plastic in the landscape, and also work closely with YDMT to ensure that we are removing quite a lot of the plastic that's already out there at the moment. Thank you for that. I can't see who put the question in the chat, but whoever from YDMT, thank you very much. So some key points that we need to cover about establishing woodland in the Yorkshire Dales and actually everywhere is that funding is more focused on ensuring successful establishment. It's not just about planting. We need to make sure that we're putting trees in the right places. And as a result of this, there's been quite a lot of significant guidance that's been released in the past year. And it's been changing quite a lot over the past few months. Some of you may have heard of the wading bird guidance that was released by the Forestry Commission. last year, and that has meant that there are significant delays in terms of planting schemes because of the survey window that has to be met before approving a site for woodland creation. What that means is that if you are going to be planting a site and you're in an area where there's a lot of waders and you need to do a survey, that's going to need to be done between March and August time. So say you sent us a request in for a tree planting site and we determined that it would need a survey, you've already sort of missed the window for this year. So you wouldn't be looking to plant your trees in October to March of 23, 24. You would be looking to plant them 24, 25, because we have to give time for those survey results to come in. And obviously, if we've not commissioned your surveys for this year, that it's going to be next year's surveys. So when we say that get in touch with us as soon as possible, this is why. For any site over 0.5 hectare, it has to go in for an environmental impact assessment. And that means that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that it reaches that criteria. If you are unsure of whether or not you're in an area that might be good for woodland creation, there's the Woodland Opportunities Map. The link is there, but you can just type in Woodland Opportunities Map Yorkshire Dales into your search engine, and that'll generate a lot of information for you as well. But just get in touch with us. How we can help, as I've said, we've got quite a big team now. We've expanded quite a lot due to all these other funding availability for woodland creation that is out there, and we can help advise you on whether or not woodland is appropriate for your site, help you with the design and management of contractors and ongoing maintenance. We work really closely with quite a few partners. So if you did go down a funding stream, then we could help you in terms of communication and any queries you might have about how that might work. And this is just an overview of a typical process. I've pretty much covered that by explaining about the timeframes. But one of the biggest changes is that we have a new email address for woodland creation specifically. So woodlandcreation@yorkshiredales.org.uk. That's for anything woodland creation. And then the old one, which is trees@yorkshiredales.org.uk, is for anything to do with any work you need doing on protected trees or management plans, which I'll come on to now. So there is funding available for putting together a management plan for any woodlands that you have. It must be over 3 hectares and cover all the woodland that is within your holding. So we've got a team that can help you put together that management plan, which gives you access to capital items and funding through CS. It's not my wheelhouse, but certainly something that can be advised on. And again, if you email trees@yorkshiredales.org.uk, then we can advise you on that as well. We're trying to focus on ancient woodland at the moment because there isn't that much of it in the Yorkshire Dales, and it would be great to have it all under a woodland management plan. But certainly get in touch if you have any woodland that you're interested in managing. And there's a few links there talking about various things that I've mentioned, including the Northern Forest boundary and the White Rose Forest boundary as well. I'm sure Vanessa will find a way to circulate these slides if people would like access to them. And that's all from me. Are there any questions?
Not yet. I'll just give it a minute in case anyone's typing. But if anyone does want a copy of the slides, you just drop me an email or give me a ring. Same contact details as you did to book in. It'll be great. I don't think we've got any more questions coming in.
Brill. Thank you.
All right. Is it me then?
I think it's your turn, Lydia.
All right. Thank you. That was quite brief, and mine should be quite brief as well. So I'll crack on if that's okay with everyone. I'll just share my screen. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yes, thanks. I can see the main presentation taking up kind of 2/3, and then
Right. Okay. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
Okay, grand. So yeah, so I'll just talk a bit briefly about the Farming and Protected Landscapes programme. My name's Lydia. I'm on the team with 3 of the people delivering the scheme. So there are a few of us covering the whole park who can help you if needs be. So just to start with, so these are the programme themes. This is sort of what we hang the whole programme off, and it gives you a bit of context for your applications. We ask that all the applications hit at least one of these themes and preferably more than one. And one thing to note is that any project that deals specifically with sustainable farm businesses, so that's the place theme, that does need to be balanced out with something from nature, climate or people as well. Other than that, these are quite self-explanatory. I'll let you have a quick read, but yeah, there's more information online. And also worth noting that any project has also got to support priorities in the National Park Management Plan, and we provide these details with the application pack. So the programme has just been extended by another year, which means it'll run until the end of March 2025. So we're about halfway through. We're just about to end on year 2 at the moment. So we've got 2 full years left for this programme, so there's plenty of time. In terms of budget, so the budget we've got for this next coming financial year is £1 million. It's yet to be confirmed for the final year, but we're expecting it to be around the same. So that'll be around £1 million. We've already done a fair few projects. We've already got a fair bit of the spend committed for 23/24, but we do still have about half our budget left. So there's still money in the pot and there's still plenty of time. The way that FIPL works is that we mirror countryside stewardship rates. So that's capital grant rates, options, as well, management options as well. So where we can, we use those same rates, and that just keeps it streamlined and makes it fairly straightforward. If there aren't any countryside stewardship rates, we use actual costs, and we use varying intervention rates for those. For these, we require quotes. If a particular item is over £5,000, we'll ask for 3 quotes. If it's under £5,000, 1 or 2 is fine. And the intervention rates depend on the nature of the work. So, for example, we've had projects which are bespoke habitat creation, and in those cases, we often fund it up to 100%. But for other work that supports the farm business, so for example, holiday accommodation, campsites, that sort of thing, we'll fund up to 40% of the total cost. So yeah, that intervention rate for actual cost items does vary, but we can help you kind of sort out and figure out how much that's going to be. And also worth noting that any application over £5,000 goes to our local assessment panel. They meet every 6 weeks, and they're the ones who we present the applications to, and they're the ones who've got the final say on whether it goes ahead or not. A quick note on machinery. So unfortunately, it's quite rare that we're able to award funding for machinery. It needs to relate to other aspects of the application. So we can't just fund, for example, quad bikes, ATVs. Actually, we can't fund those at all. But yeah, any machinery that you would like to apply for needs to go through a flowchart process, but we've been asked to follow by DEFRA. But again, we can help you kind of sort that out and decide whether it is worth going ahead with that. Another thing to note is barn restoration. So we have done a few barn restoration projects, but we're not currently receiving applications for any more, just because of the timescale and because of the cost. But what we can do is fund small barn repairs. So that's we sort of base it off a threshold of around £10,000, and we're looking sort of at things like barn roof repairs or doors and floors, that kind of thing. Small minor repairs that would probably come in at just under £10,000. We are still taking applications for those, so worth thinking about if you've got any historic barns on your farm that need a little bit of work. So those are the key updates for you about FIPL. I'll just go on to talk about a few examples of what we've done, because that's always good, useful context. So I mentioned the barn restorations already, but this is just a by no means exhaustive list of other stuff that we'll do under FIPL. So you can see here there's hedgerows we've done a lot of, habitat restoration, so hay meadows, limestone grassland or moorland, permissive footpaths, and improving current public footpaths as well. Soil health, paddock grazing infrastructure, that's something we've done a lot of recently. So if you're interested in rotational grazing or anything like that, we can fund infrastructure for that and also advice. We've got a mentoring project at the moment with Pasture for Life. That is also a rotational grazing kind of soil health program. We funded a wildflower nursery. We funded holiday accommodation, that sort of thing. So a lot of survey work as well, ecological surveys, historical environment surveys. So yeah, you can see the sort of breadth of things that we will be looking at. So hopefully that's given you some inspiration. We've got a few case studies here for you as well, because people find that quite useful to see exactly what things we've actually done in real life. So this is case study A, which is working with a consultant to make the current farming enterprises more robust, efficient and resilient to external forces. So what we're aiming to do is introduce the paddock grazing system, increase the efficiencies on the farm and reduce reliance on inputs, and increase animal health and welfare. So to do that, we funded infrastructure, including electric fencing, hedgerows, gates, water supply, equipment like sheep pens and weighing scales. And we also provided resources for a farm open day that was aimed at allowing the farmer to influence and do some peer-to-peer learning with other farmers, and that was really popular. So that was a good varied application there, and it's worked really well, and we're continuing to monitor it. So that's one example for you. A second example, this one was more about biodiversity and habitat management, but again, making the farm more resilient to climate change. And the interesting thing is, in doing that, you sort of open yourself up to opportunities for future funding, which is much more focused on biodiversity and habitat management. So it was a lot of restoration of the heathland, protecting the SSSI along the river, again, hedgerows and plantings and infield trees, and then also looking at the semi-improved species rich meadow and hay meadows, and looking at ways of maintaining traditional management for those. And then finally, another case study for you. This was with a farmer group that were linked by a common, and the idea was to do a joint natural capital assessment, an ecological survey, and a review of private investment opportunities. So this was really looking to find ways of finding private alternative funding sources. So that could be through new carbon markets, green private investment, and also engaging with other farmers and engaging with other partners like the Rivers Trust and the Woodlands Trust. So as well as the natural capital assessment, that included surveys, and we also funded an intermediary who'd be able to bring everyone together and to drive the project. And through that project, we also funded the production of a business plan and a portfolio and individual carbon audits. So 3 quite varied case studies there, but hopefully that will give you an idea of the sort of things we have funded in the past and what we could continue funding. So just to finish up, we're open to any ideas, no matter how silly. One of the main reasons we're here is to help you figure out how you can turn an idea into reality. So we're perfectly happy to get in touch and come and look around and have a chat with you and keep talking, just to figure out how we can turn your application into an agreement. Yeah, so we're very happy to have that conversation. If you look online on our website, so just Google Farming and Protected Landscapes Yorkshire Dales, you'll be able to see an end of year summary as well, which will sort of give you an idea of everything that we've done, which I won't go into detail here because the list is long, but that will give you just a bit more detail about what we have done in the past, and also all our details are on there as well, so you'll be able to get in touch with us. And I think that's me. So yeah, so that's me. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a whistle stop tour, but yeah, does anyone have any questions for me?
There haven't been any come in yet. If we just give it a minute, someone might be typing.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Vanessa. So Vanessa's posted a link to the full summary, which will be useful. And again, yeah, all our contact details are online. So if you want to have a chat outside of this meeting, feel free to get in touch. Just shoot us an email, or all our numbers are on there as well. And yeah, any ideas you've got, if you've had any inspiration and just need to talk it through with someone, we'd be happy to do that.
No. I don't think there's any questions come through.
That's fine. And
Thank you all for coming tonight. I think we'll stay on for another 5 minutes if anybody wants to stay on, if they've got anything they want to chat about, discuss, any questions. But thank you all for coming. If you do want any help or advice, you know, please get in touch.